37 missiles, multiple drone strikes, 3 American military bases hit in a single coordinated operation. And the President of the United States is posting clips from a TV show. That's where we are right now. That's the actual state of play in the Middle East as of this morning. So, here's what we're going to figure out together. First, why did Trump hesitate to retaliate when the Apache helicopter went down, and what changed his mind in the span of just a few hours? Second, how coordinated was Iran's response, and did any of those strikes actually land where they intended? And third, what does this escalation mean for American military positioning in the region over the next 72 hours? We'll get to all three. But to make sense of any of it, you need to understand one specific thing about how Iran's military command structure actually works. And it's not what most cable news anchors are telling you. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps operates independently from the conventional military. That matters because it means the IRGC can authorize strikes without going through the formal chain of command that would normally require approvals from multiple layers of government. When Iran's foreign minister IRGC said they would respond powerfully, he wasn't making a threat in the abstract. He was signaling that the IRGC had already made the decision. The conventional military was already in motion. By the time anyone outside the room knew what was happening, the operation was already locked in. Now, the sequence of events today. Early this morning, the United States military accused Iran of using a Shahed drone to shoot down an Apache helicopter that was operating over the Strait of Hormuz. The Apache was loitering in the area. Iran's foreign minister immediately pushed back. He said, "Look, there's a lot of activity happening right now in that strait. If you don't want your helicopters getting shot down, maybe don't have them hovering over Iranian territory." That's the diplomatic language. What he was really saying was this: you're in our space, you're harassing our interests, and you're taking casualties because of your own decisions. Trump, when he first learned about the Apache, wasn't convinced it was a big deal. He told the Wall Street Journal earlier in the day that the incident was minor, that it didn't warrant an immediate response. But then something changed. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and General Dan Kane briefed the president with updated intelligence about the drone that allegedly struck the helicopter. That briefing shifted Trump's calculation. Within hours, the decision was made. The United States would strike Iranian interests in the Strait of Hormuz. 3 waves of attacks, precision strikes. The message was clear: you don't shoot down American aircraft without consequences. But Iran had already anticipated this. That's the critical part. Iranian military planners knew that retaliation would trigger an American response. They knew the timeline, they knew the geography, and they had already prepared a counter-response that was waiting in the queue. When the American strikes landed, Iran's IRGC didn't need to convene an emergency meeting. They didn't need to debate or deliberate. The operation was already authorized. The missiles were already fueled. The drones were already in the air. At 2:30 a.m. local time, the IRGC Navy attacked the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Multiple ballistic missiles, multiple drones. Satellite imagery from earlier this week shows that Al Azra Air Base in Jordan was hosting an unusually high concentration of American military aircraft. 30 F-35 Lightning jets, 36 F-15 Strike Eagles. At least 68 cargo planes had landed in the preceding days. That's 3 times the normal deployment level. Iran's intelligence services were watching that buildup. They were tracking every aircraft that landed. They were noting the runway patterns, the hangar positions, the command infrastructure. When the order came to strike, the targeting was precise. The IRGC says they hit 21 separate targets across the region. They claim successful strikes on command centers in Jordan. They claim direct hits on F-35 hangars. They claim the destruction of a newly captured MQ-9 Reaper drone that had been operating over Iranian airspace just hours earlier. Now, some of those strikes were intercepted. Patriot air defense systems in Bahrain engaged incoming Iranian missiles. Some drones were shot down, but the sheer volume of the attack overwhelmed the defensive capacity. You can see in the footage multiple explosions on the ground in Manama, Bahrain, in the direction of the 5th Fleet headquarters. You can see air defense activity lighting up the sky over Amman, Jordan, as ballistic missiles came in. The scale of the operation was not a symbolic gesture. This was a full military strike. Here's where it gets interesting. Iran's foreign minister IRGC posted a statement immediately after the strikes concluded. He said, "Despite its defeats on the battlefield, the U.S. opted to test our determination. Our powerful armed forces will leave no attack or threat unanswered." Then he added something more specific. The Strait of Hormuz is not international waters. It's shared between Iran and Oman and located thousands of miles away from U.S. shores. Maritime boundaries are crystal clear. Foreign forces in proximity to our territory are at constant risk on account of their own human errors, plane accidents, or potentially being caught in crossfire. That language is not accidental. He's laying out Iran's legal argument for why American military presence in that region is inherently dangerous, and why Iran bears no responsibility for the consequences. It's a preemptive defense against any further American retaliation. But then IRGC said something else that signals where this is actually heading. Iran prefers the language of diplomacy. However, as our brave warriors have shown to the world, we know how to speak other languages too. That's a direct statement. We've demonstrated our capability. We've shown that we can strike American military bases across 3 countries simultaneously. We can penetrate your air defenses. We can hit targets with precision. Now, the question is whether you want to continue this conversation through military channels or whether you want to talk. Meanwhile, Trump is posting clips from the West Wing, TV show footage, a caption that says the mission is a proportional response with a question mark. Then he's posting about going to see the Knicks play the Spurs at Madison Square Garden. That's not the response of a commander-in-chief managing a live military escalation. That's the response of someone either completely disconnected from the situation or deliberately trying to project a sense of normalcy and control that doesn't actually exist. Here's the thing that matters. Iran's IRGC just demonstrated something that changes the calculation for every American commander in the region. They showed that they can coordinate a multi-country, multi-platform strike operation with precision timing. They showed that they can overwhelm air defenses through volume and sophistication. They showed that they have real-time intelligence on American force deployments and positioning. That last point is the one that keeps military planners awake at night. Iran knows where your aircraft are. Iran knows how many of them there are. Iran knows the runway dimensions. Iran knows the hangar locations. That's not guesswork. That's signals intelligence and human intelligence working in parallel. Now, what happens next depends entirely on Trump's next move. If he orders another round of strikes, Iran has already signaled that they will respond again. But the next response will be larger. The IRGC has already demonstrated that they have the capability and the will to execute complex operations. They're not bluffing, they're not posturing, they're showing their hand deliberately so that the calculation changes. The other element that matters is Israel. While all of this is happening with Iran and the United States, Israel continues to strike Lebanon. That's a separate escalation happening in parallel. If Israel decides to use this moment of American-Iranian tension to launch strikes against Iranian targets, the entire dynamic shifts. You could be looking at a regional conflict that extends beyond the Strait and into Lebanon, Syria, and potentially beyond. Iran's foreign minister made one final statement that's worth parsing carefully. He said foreign forces should exit the region as soon as possible, an environment which will never be hospitable to hostile presence. That's not a threat. That's a statement of fact from Iran's perspective. The region is no longer safe for American military presence at the current deployment levels. That's the message. That's what Iran is communicating through both words and actions. The question now is whether Trump understands what just happened, whether he recognizes that Iran has changed the equation, whether he grasps that the next American strike will trigger a response that's larger and more consequential than what just occurred. Because if he doesn't understand that, if he treats this as a moment to reassert American dominance through another round of strikes, then you're looking at a genuine escalation spiral that could spiral out of control very quickly. The Apache helicopter that started this whole sequence was operating in disputed territory. The pilot is gone. The aircraft is destroyed. But that single incident has now triggered a chain reaction that involves 3 countries, multiple military branches, and real-time intelligence operations. That's how these things work. One incident, one decision, one response. And suddenly you're in a situation where the next move could determine whether this stays contained or whether it spreads. What's your assessment of what Trump should do right now? Because that's the actual question. Not what he will do, but what the situation actually demands. Because those two things might not be the same.